Max Election Special. The Midterms, You Decide 2014.
Welcome back, everybody. Along with J.D. Hayworth, I'm Ed Berliner. Thanks so much for joining us here on the Newsmax Network. Here's a couple of more numbers coming in now as we start to look at not only the East Coast, but we start to move our way just a little bit farther to the central part of the country right now, some of the other races. First, let's go ahead and look at the Michigan governor's race right now. Early on in the race, Rick Snyder with a 14-point lead over Mark Schauer. And now let's go to the Texas governor's race. That's where Greg Abbott now has a 16-point, a big lead over Wendy Davis. So looking good for the Republicans there. Speaking of governor, we talked a couple of moments ago about what's happening in Florida, because actually it seems as if Rick Scott is hanging on in the odiferous race, if you will. Let's go ahead and bring in Javier Manjarres, who is the managing editor of SharkTank.com. I know you joined JD an awful lot on America's Forum as well. You watch what happens in Florida. A surprise at this point that Rick Scott is hanging on?
Actually, no. I predicted if Rick Scott wins, it'll be between 2 and 5 percentage points. So really, he's making me look like a genius. But I thought it was going to be close like everyone else did. But I didn't think it'd be this close. But then again, I did predict it. But we'll see.
Well, all right, let's
96% reporting, or 97%. So,
well, okay, Javier, let's drill down on your prediction, because John Zogby had some very different numbers. Now, what have you been hearing from your contacts around the state in terms of turnout and that whole effort by the Crist campaign to go into what, I guess, Broward County to try to keep the polls open to 9:30, straight out of the DNC playbook? He made that transition to their tactics pretty well.
But also that as well as President Obama called in. He robocalled for Charlie Crist into strictly black communities. So they're trying in earnest to bring out the black vote. To me, that's a sign of desperation. But my contacts told me around the state that Governor Scott's ground game was superior to the Democrats, and that early voting showed it. I mean, they had the vote out, and a lot of people were galvanized to defeat someone like Charlie Crist, who by far is historically probably America's most the worst politician in the sense that he has flip-flopped on every single issue and has no principles. So I think this is a referendum against Charlie Crist and President Obama at the same time.
All right, let's also talk about one of the referendums here quickly. Get your take on this. The medical marijuana referendum in Florida has now been defeated. There was an awful lot of talk about that, about how that would swing and what that then would do overall if it did pass, and what it would do nationally. Any surprise whatsoever that this is defeated?
No, I think I thought it was going to be defeated all along, just because the way the bill was written. Yeah, on the outset, it seems great that medicinal marijuana that would help a lot of patients that need it, but the way it was worded, it opened up the door for recreational marijuana use. And people saw right through that.
All right, Javier Manjarres, thanks so much for joining us. We'll check in with you later on in the evening. Right now, let's go ahead and turn to Washington, D.C. Ben Wikler, host of The Good Fight. He joins us live here right now to talk about what he is seeing and what the numbers tell him. Ben, it's been an interesting night to watch already. Give us an idea of what's sitting at the top of your list at the moment.
Well, tonight I am thinking a lot about Scott Brown, who has, I think, done an amazing thing by losing 2 Senate elections in 2 states in 2 years and a day. That's a pretty impressive record, and I can't really think of anyone else in American history who can boast about that. Aside from that, I have to say, as a Democrat myself, tonight's not the best night of my life.
Well, you know, it was very interesting, Ben. I got to give you high marks in terms of the screed against former Senator Brown, but I also will give you high marks for your candor. Apart from Jeanne Shaheen and the expected change in the Pennsylvania gubernatorial race, what other bright spots, what surprises do you expect tonight for the Democrat Party? Let me rephrase that. What pleasant surprises do you expect tonight for the Democrats?
You know, one thing that in a way is not a surprise tonight, and that's the surprise in a certain sense in the big picture, is seeing Senator Franken cruise to re-election. And this is an election that 6 years ago people would have thought maybe would have gone against Al or would have been a nail-biter like the last one. When Franken was elected the first time, he was elected by a 0.01% margin. That was one of the closest margins in any Senate election in U.S. history. And tonight, he's resoundingly been reelected. He's demonstrated that he's a great senator for the people of Minnesota. So that's not a surprise tonight, and I think in a sense that's the surprise from a national perspective. What we'll see tonight, maybe we'll see bright spots in Alaska. That would be great. That'd be a nice thing to wake up to tomorrow. I think we're going to see something good come out of North Carolina in a race that has been, the center of tens of millions of dollars on both sides. That's been a giant, hard-fought contest. And then the nail-biters, I hope they're nail-biters and they pan out well on my side, will be Iowa and Colorado. Certainly the fate of the Senate hangs on those two states at this point, as well as whatever happens with probably a runoff in Louisiana.
All right, Ben Wikler, thanks so much for joining us. We'll check in with you later on in the evening and see how your fingernails are doing at this point and see if you've managed to chew them down yet to a certain point. The race that he mentioned, by the way, Democratic Senator Al Franken, he has won re-election in Minnesota, and he's right, it was a thumping. It was 52 to 44% at the end.
Understand what goes on in Minnesota. It is a solidly blue state with the exception of a couple of congressional districts and occasionally in a gubernatorial race when the Republican can lift the banner of reform. In Al Franken's case, what he did essentially was to go into a deep freeze, not make public comments, spend the money that an incumbent would have with an advantage, and it worked out for him in a blue state. Not a huge surprise.
All right, now we want to know what you think. What is your take on a particular race? Hashtag YouDecide2014. Get to us on Twitter. We'll talk about it at the Max Cafe as we roll through the night right here on Newsmax.